Tales She Told Me, a podcast featuring ordinary women who have overcome and done extraordinary things. I'm your host, Farrah Haidar. Joining me today is Nurjahan Boulden. Jahan grew up with dreams of sharing belly dance with the world, but at 21, she was shot in the leg with an assault rifle in a random attack and thought those dreams were destroyed. She suffered in silence physically and emotionally for almost a decade before she met another survivor who inspired her to share her story. She's now a belly dance teacher, community builder, and storyteller, inviting people around the world to release shame and celebrate their bodies, no matter what they've survived. Jahan, I am so excited to have you on the show. When I first saw your story, all I could think of was how my sisters and I, during the Civil War in Beirut, we'd turn up the music really loud and dance as bombs literally rained around the house.
Uh,
And your message of healing and reclaiming belly dance specifically, actually, really resonated with me. So
mm,
let's just start your story at the beginning. You're young, beautiful, still beautiful, but at 21. And what
yeah.
happened?
Yeah, I was just first, oh my goodness, you got me choked up just sharing that at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Um, I grew up belly dancing much like you. Actually, some of the people that I grew up with were Lebanese from Beirut, and we grew up belly dancing together on the East Coast in the US. And in my culture, my mom is from East Africa, from Tanzania.
Mm-hmm.
We belly dance for celebration. We belly dance to feel. We belly dance just as a part of our culture, which you understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's less of a formal kind of performance thing and more of an expression. It's an expression of joy, of sadness, of fill in the blank. But I was so passionate about dance growing up, and I was in college. When I got to college, actually, with one of my good friends who was Lebanese, we decided to teach belly dance on campus because we both missed those spaces that we used to have with all women together, just freely expressing ourselves. So we started teaching belly dance on campus to, faculty, staff, and students. It was so much fun. And I felt like, I want to find a way to make this my life. I want to be able to belly dance. I want to be able to teach. I wasn't really sure what it could look like because in my family, in my culture, we only dance around other women. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
private thing. We don't belly dance in public.
Yep.
And so I wasn't sure if I was really bold enough to kind of take it bigger than that and step outside of what was accepted in my culture. And then one night I was on vacation in Toronto, Canada. I went for my cousin's wedding. The wedding was over and we decided to go out in the city. We went out to, we wanted to either go karaokeing or salsa dancing. And neither of those places were open. It was a Sunday night. We ended up going to a reggae kind of nightclub. And there was a shooting. I ended up getting shot in the leg, and another man was killed, and another man was shot in the foot. And after the shooting, while I was in a wheelchair, my mom was actually in the middle of giving me a sponge bath. My whole world had just gotten flipped upside down, and I lost my ability to even walk in that moment or at that time. I overheard somebody that I loved, one of my loved ones, say, "Well, what did she expect? She went out dancing." So the same story of if women dance or move in public, bad things happen, there are consequences. And I linked that to my shooting in my mind and in my body. And after that, I tried to dance. I tried to do the things that I used to do, but my body didn't work the same. And I was terrified of stepping outside again, breaking the rules again, and what the consequences might be for that. And so I slowly kind of closed in on myself over the next decade. It happened when I was 21 years old. I didn't share my story or open up about how I was feeling or even dance again until I was 31 years old. Um, So it was a devastating experience. And a lot of people think that, the way I tell my story, it's like, oh, and then I started dancing again, right? And you think it happens really quickly, but I spent a decade just hiding.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, in the Middle East, people do dance in public. Women do dance in public and like during
Mhm.
weddings and stuff like that. But it's definitely not approved. And I will say that, like you, there were a lot of female-only spaces where dancing
Yeah.
happened. And some of my favorite memories of my mom, she's passed now, so all right, rest in
Mm.
peace. But um, were of her dancing amongst women, and
Yeah.
so moving to the States, it was a real shock for me to see how it's. I mean, it's not treated the same. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah,
very
that
different.
that was very different. So, talk to us a little bit. You said that it wasn't until you turned 31, right? So,
Mhm.
what was the impetuous? What was the other than I think aging is its own impetuous,
Yeah.
sometimes its own
Absolutely.
motivator. But what
Mhm.
happened to motivate you to get back to it?
Well, it was actually a woman who came into my life. Things had spiraled in a downward way. I was in a really low place. Um, and I had at that point been having panic attacks, been, running and screaming when there were loud noises. I was having a lot of symptoms of PTSD, and I had tried counseling a number of times. One time I went and I said, "Look, I only had 5 sessions available at my work. I need you to tell me how to fix myself. I can't keep coming here because I didn't have the insurance at the time to be able to go to counseling." And the first question he asked was, "Have you ever shared your story?" And I said, "Well, everyone in my life knows that I've been shot." At the time, I was walking with a cane. And he said, "Yeah, everybody knows that. But have you ever shared what happened that night? Have you ever opened up about your feelings, about what's been going on in your life, how you've been kind of moving through the world?" And I realized I had actually never talked about it. I asked my parents, I asked my husband, I asked my friends, "Did I ever tell you about what happened that night?" And everybody basically said, "No, we just figured you never wanted to talk about it, you know?
Oh wow.
So we never brought it up." And um, so I decided I'm going to share my story. I started out by sharing with my husband, which was one of the hardest experiences because it was my first time opening up. My whole body was shaking. It was really, really difficult. I had this deep fear that everybody was going to judge me for struggling when, I'm supposed to be lucky to be alive. The man next to me got killed. How dare I feel bad for myself? Or, it's been a decade. How can I still be thinking about this? I should be over it. All of those things that we tell ourselves. And then I went to an alumni event at my college. I graduated from Pitzer College in Claremont, and they were honoring a gun violence survivor at the event. And she spoke about her story, which was different from mine. She had lost her child to gun violence while she was driving the car. So I won't get into it. It's a devastating story, but if you are able to look up Rhonda Foster, she is an incredible woman who does really great work in the world when it comes to preventing gun violence. And I walked up to her afterwards. I somehow it felt like it took so much courage to walk up to her and say, "Hey, your story meant so much to me, and here's why." Said, "I know that mine's nothing like yours, but I got shot when I was 21 years old." And she said, "Oh, you're a survivor." She said, "We're looking for a survivor to speak at an event that's coming up for women against gun violence. Would you like to speak?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not a survivor." Also keep in mind that a lot of this was before mass shootings were happening so much and there were people sharing their stories publicly. This was the first time a decade went by. It was the first time I had heard somebody speaking about their experience with gun violence. And so she insisted, "Yes, you are. You're a survivor. I would love to have you speak." And I said, "Yes, sure," terrified, knowing for sure that like a week later, she was going to realize that I'm not actually a survivor. I've done nothing great with my life. And I know I don't deserve the platform or the recognition that she was trying to give me by calling me a survivor. I thought survivors were people that did great things after something bad happened to them. I didn't realize that survivors were just people who survived, that in itself required so much strength. and resilience just to wake up the next day and get dressed and go to work and, fill in the blank, whatever it is. She never took back her offer, and so I showed up and I decided I am going to tell my story vulnerably. I am going to share all of my pain and everything I've been through. And I just knew that everybody was going to judge me. And I decided, let them judge me. It's okay. I'm just going to do it for my own sake because that guy told me that if I shared my story, it would help me heal.
Here.
So I did. I shared everything. I was shaking, I was crying, and I was speaking to over 300 complete strangers. And when I climbed off the stage, the entire room stood up and gave me a standing ovation. I lost it. I broke down crying, and I just had no idea that I deserved compassion. And I had
Yeah.
no idea that anyone would care that this horrible thing happened and that I was still struggling with it. But so many people cared, and it was so healing to be received, and that was the beginning of me really reaching out for help and saying, "Okay, I wanna figure out how to work through this. I wanna know what it's like to be somebody who survives something like this and finds joy on the other side of it, because I still was not there, and it took me a very long time even after that to find it.
Of course. But
Yeah.
can I ask you something, like when you first, like during that decade, unconsciously you had made the connection between dancing in public and something bad happening. But were you
Mhm.
like consciously aware of it?
Oh, I wasn't subconscious, that connection was given to me time and time again. I actually have a specific story where, and this stayed with me. This really stayed with me. I think I was about 8 years old, and my cousins and I were at the mosque with our moms and dads and aunties, figure fill in the blank, everybody, right? The whole community was there. And after the khutbah was over, the services were over, we walked outside. We were across the street, and we were messing around. I was 8 years old. My oldest cousin was probably like 13 or 14 years old. And um, one of my aunties got really angry and pulled us aside and said, "You do not dance outside of the mosque." And I was confused. I didn't think we were dancing. We were just being kids. I think we were just messing around. Maybe we were. I didn't even notice. We were just outside in the sunshine being kids. And that night she sat us down and she said, "Look, I have a friend whose daughter was, she would go to church and she would wear these short skirts. And she would play this game where she'd bend over and pick up a penny and then drop the penny and bend over and pick it up. And she was sexually assaulted right outside of the church.
Oh my.
And she said, her mom blames God and her mom has now lost her religion, but that's not on God. That was because of the way that girl was behaving."
So she blamed the
And
victim, basically.
yeah, absolutely. And those were the kinds of stories I heard growing up, right? If you do these things, bad things happen. It wasn't just like, it wasn't a subconscious connection. It was a very purposeful connection. And I recognize that my family members told those stories because they are survivors. A lot of them are survivors, and they didn't get the compassion that they deserved. And they made those connections. When you live in a world where it feels like you don't have control over your own safety, over your own body, you try to find ways where, especially when you have daughters or nieces, you try to find ways where we can protect ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And that narrative then becomes based on what you wear or how you move or how you don't move, how invisible you make yourself. If you make yourself invisible enough, you won't attract the wrong attention, and then you'll be safe. But what I learned was that it doesn't matter what you do. It's not about attracting or not attracting the wrong attention. It's about changing the actual problems in the world, which are people, raising children who think it's okay, or society raising mostly men and boys who think it's okay to do these horrible things to women. And that doesn't get resolved by us making ourselves smaller. that in fact gets resolved by us making ourselves bigger and louder and having our stories heard and establishing that it's not our fault. Violence against us is not our fault.
Yeah.
And that's a big reason why I do the work that I'm doing now.
It's so I can relate to that so much because I grew up obviously in the Middle East, and very similar kind of messages were sent. Like, I'll never
Mhm.
forget, I walked into the senior room, and I went to a fairly liberal American accredited school. Like, everyone there was an expat. It wasn't like really traditional or very religious or anything like that. And I walked into the senior room, and there was a girl sitting with a guy, and they were telling her, somebody was telling the story of how some girl late at night got stranded at a club. These two guys go, "Hey, we'll give you a ride home." We know that ended badly, right? But she was desperate. It was the middle of the night. She had nowhere she could, it wasn't before cell phones. Like, cell phones weren't really popular at the time. And, she got raped, unfortunately. And and the girl's response, it wasn't the guy's response. The girl's response was, "Well, what was she doing out that late climbing into a
And
car with a guy? What
it's
did she
because we are
expect?" But we're
humans.
trained. We're
What
trained.
did she expect? Yeah.
Yeah. We're trained to do that. Like, and I can't tell you the countless
Yes.
times, like, even I had a similar experience to you at like 9 or 10, where
Mhm.
I was wearing shorts and I got pulled over by one of the aunties, like, "You don't dress like that." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and it's sad, and I agree with you that that being bigger, actually taking up more space, is more
Yeah.
protection than trying to disappear. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's
Even though people take that as threatening a lot of times and
I
it
know.
can result still. Look, and at the end of the day, the violence that comes against us, it doesn't necessarily change based on the size that we make ourselves, but what
Mhm.
does change is whether or not our voices are heard, our stories are heard, whether or not we can impact and change this narrative that's been perpetuated in so many ways, in so many cultures, in so many religions, in so many countries. It goes across the board, you know?
Yeah.
And we keep pointing our finger at other places saying, "Oh, they're doing it wrong. Oh, they don't know." We're all living in societies that tell that same narrative to women and girls, and it's time to change it.
It is. As the mother of a daughter, I have to tell you, it's
Mm,
really hard. Um,
yeah.
I always tell people, I have my filter on a lot when I talk to my daughter. Like, I have to she thinks I'm like really quiet and hesitant. That's not what's
Oh,
happening. I'm filtering like the messages to make sure that I'm not passing on stuff
gosh.
unconsciously that I've been taught. But
Yeah.
it's hard because you wanna protect her. So you wanna tell her, don't trust that.
Mm,
Don't wear something overly explicit because it's going to attract attention. But at the same time, you're like, but is that really the message I want to send her? So it's this constant tug and pull of how to keep her protected with the reality of the where what the world is, right?
yeah.
Versus the message that you actually want her to live by. And it's so hard. I got to tell you, there's this constant tug and
I
pull.
can't even imagine. I have 3 boys, and I feel like that's how we keep your daughter protected, right?
Yeah.
Is how we raise our children to recognize that it's never you don't a woman is never asking
Yeah.
for violence against her. Never, ever, ever. That you have to respect other humans' bodies no matter what. The consent is so vitally important. All of those things because you can't control how people receive you. I'm out here, I'm wearing, I'm fully covered for the most part while I'm belly dancing. And I have one cousin, so a cousin on my husband's side, who says, you make all these statements in your videos about people sexualizing this. And he's like, how could they sexualize it? Like, yeah, like if they wanted to sexualize it, you're like, look what you're wearing muumuus, right? So he's thinking it's ridiculous that people would ever sexualize it. And then I have other groups of people who are like, I can't believe that you would show your hair, like you're a prostitute, you're this and that. And you can't control how other people receive your clothing, your actions, your all you can control is the choices that you make and how in alignment they are with your values.
Yeah.
And so if somebody makes choices that inflict violence on other people, who's in the wrong? You
Not,
know?
not the people getting hurt. Um,
Yeah.
so take me back a little bit. You have now given this beautiful talk at a survivor event. You've been told you're a survivor.
Mhm.
Where did you go from there? Because I know it was a long process. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm a survivor and everything's gonna be great now. Oh, and I can dance again.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, no, it definitely wasn't like that. That happened when I was 31, and I made my first belly dance video for TikTok, um, in December, a year and a month ago. So and I'm 38. So, yeah,
7 years.
31, yes, 7 years before I was willing to show my dance publicly. Now, a lot happened in that time, and I don't want anyone who's listening to think that, "Oh, if I'm gonna heal, it's gonna take me so long." Honestly, I think we're all in a if we are in a state of wanting to become better or to improve on ourselves or to heal in any way, it's a lifelong process, right? The only time it's not a lifelong process is if we're not doing it. Right?
Yeah.
We're choosing to stay stagnant, right? So, uh I've uncovered so many layers, layer upon layer, and I'm so proud of myself for getting to the point where I was ready to start healing. And that's when it started when I was 31 years old. And I started out by saying, okay, I shared my story out loud. And that felt so good. It felt so good to, the way that you let go of shame is by saying it out loud, letting people see you. Shame thrives in silence. But when you stop being silent, that's when you start addressing the shame. So I started sharing my story publicly. And the first time after that, I shared it publicly, I did it in a TEDx talk. And I felt like I had been hit by a train. I was on stage telling everyone, share your stories. The vulnerability is the key to blah, blah, blah. Right. And then I get off the stage and I feel like my entire body hurts. I was shaking and I couldn't figure out what happened. And I was talking to a friend of mine, my sister and a friend of mine who are both therapists. And both of them said, I think that you are having a trauma response. Do you know that your emotions can get trapped in your body? No idea that we feel emotions physically in our bodies. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to find a way to work through that. I'm going to start doing things that scare me, feel what it feels like in my body when it scares me, and work through ways to process it. So I started learning ways to process emotions in my body. Mind you, I was still not dancing at this point, still not thinking I would ever go back to dance. I still was, having the physical disability that I had had for over a decade, struggling with walking, running, carrying my kids, just stuff that is basic for a lot of people. Um, and then one day, I'm facing my fears. I'm letting go of shame. So I decide I'm gonna go for a run today. I would do this every 6 months. I'm gonna go for a run today, and then I would try to run, and it would hurt like hell, and I would have to use my cane that week because I hurt myself trying to run, and it wasn't even worth it. I'd get frustrated and not try again for another 6 months. Right? That was the pattern. This time I went out and I was listening to music, and I tried to start running. It hurt like hell. And then I thought, well, maybe if I just run funny, what if I just run weird, like on one side and I'm just kind of running like that? And I tried and it hurt again. And I was about to turn around and go back and just be frustrated. And then I decided, well, I'm listening to really fun music. What if I let myself dance? But what if, because I'm really scared to dance badly because, back in my early days, belly dance was my thing. I felt like a beautiful dancer, and I knew I would never be able to dance like that again. And I was embarrassed to even try because if people saw me dance, they would know that I was bad at dancing. But I decided, you're facing fears. So I started dancing just letting go, flailing my arms, dancing on one side because my right leg still hurt. And I decided at first I would stop dancing whenever somebody would walk by. It was just in our little neighborhood. And then I decided I'm going to do it on a busy street. So I went up a busy street and I thought, in my head, usually everyone who's driving by or walking by or seeing me do something ridiculous, I think, oh, they're judging me, right?
Mhm.
But in my head, I decided I can make up anything I want. I don't really know what they're thinking. I'm going to imagine that they know my story. They know that I got shot. They know that all I want is to be able to dance again. They know that I've struggled for over a decade and they're cheering me on. So every car that went by, I imagined that they were like beeping at me and loving on me and doing all, I don't know what they were really thinking. It doesn't matter because I danced big and loud and I got a real workout. And I got back to my house and my leg hurt. Of course it hurt, right? But I felt so good. I felt like I had a release. It felt worth it to hurt my leg. Taking a little stroll and limping through did not feel worth it, but dancing and letting go and facing my fears felt so worth it. So I started doing it regularly, as often as I could, without it hurting. And I did it for 6 months straight until 6 months later, I tried running. And I ran and my leg was swollen and it hurt and but I ran again. I ran again. And then I signed up for soccer because I used to play soccer and it was great. I decided to start trying to belly dance. The reason I couldn't belly dance at first is because belly dancing forces you to be present to your body. It forces you to tap into your sensuality. It forces you to dance with the parts of your body that you love and the parts of your body that you're struggling with. And for me, that was so scary. I had detached myself from my body so much, especially from my leg, my hip, all the areas, my knee, all the areas that I'd struggled with because of the shooting. And when I started belly dancing, I was forcing myself to be present in my body and to reconnect with my body and to reconnect with my sensuality, which was so scary, especially thinking that it was my sensuality or my dancing that got me shot to begin with. I know now, obviously that's not true, but that's the connection that I made. And so I did it in the privacy of my own home. And then I started trying, okay, during 2020, I thought, I want to share this with the world. I really want other women to feel this. I know so many women who feel detached from their bodies or feel stuck or stiff in their bodies or feel like they've had to physically hide for so long just to stay safe. I want to teach this. So I started doing tutorials on YouTube, but I would only show the move. I'd be like, okay, here's what you do. Boom, boom. That's what you do. Okay. I would show the move, but I would never dance. I would never show my joy or my sensuality or my movement because I was still scared. And then come 2022, I decided, I don't know how I got there. I don't know how I got to the point where I was like, you know what? It's okay. I really been surrendering and praying and trying to align myself with what I'm meant to do here on this earth. And I felt so strongly that I meant to share this. I meant to share all of this, the healing, the joy, everything that comes with belly dancing. And so I started recording videos in my living room of myself belly dancing. And one day my sister said, like, the videos are fine and all, but you have the same background every single video. Like every single video, it's you in your living room. She said you should try dancing outside. And I was like, outside? I could never like show sensuality outside. I could dance silly outside, but show that sensuality, take up that space, look confident, look sure of myself, maybe draw the wrong kind of attention in quotes, right? I was terrified, but if somebody challenges me to do something and it sounds scary to me, I've now learned that if it feels aligned and is scary, it's a good thing. That's something to move toward. It'll expand my world instead of shrinking it. So I started dancing outside.
So
Yep.
you obviously have a very different view on belly dancing than maybe what we'll say is the typical American vernacular around that
Yeah.
belly dancing, right? talk to us a little bit about that. Like, because I have to tell you, I get really frustrated, even in
Mm,
Arab American spaces where, like, I don't know if you've ever been to a restaurant where they bring out a belly dancer, and I'm just like,
yeah.
must we? You know?
So I used to have really similar feelings. I was very triggered. I'd be very triggered because for me, it felt like this is for us. This was ours. And it's only being portrayed as being for the consumption of others. It's a performance, right? Instead of being a source of joy. So I also felt that way. Even when I started on TikTok, I'll be honest, I felt like because I also wasn't exposed to a cultural practice that dressed the way that the like in the different outfits that people are wearing that's like called a costume oftentimes, right? Instead of it being like, "Oh, we're at a wedding and this is what people are wearing and and we're dancing," or we are, it's a celebration of some kind of birthday party and the people are dressed in their clothes and we're just dancing in our clothes that we're our traditional clothes that we're wearing. So for me, I thought it was an exploitation of our practice. And I will admit, I wasn't exposed to a lot of practices of belly dance. I was exposed to our practice of belly dance. I was exposed to Lebanese practices of belly dance that I, you know, got to know as I was growing up and when I was in college. I had Iraqi friends, I had Egyptian friends, I fill in the blank, Syrian friends, friends from Kenya, from different parts that all kind of practiced it in a similar way to the way I did. So I
Yeah.
felt like this is how we do it, right? This is a cultural practice. I'm learning, and I have learned, I think, over time that there are different ways that it's practiced. And I don't know how to differentiate between what is just a different cultural practice versus what is, an exploitation or a misappropriation of
Yeah.
this practice. So I've started changing a little bit. And I think it changed the way I thought about it for two reasons. One is because I started realizing, okay, I don't know everything that there is to know. So I can't say what is or isn't suppose it's not what is or isn't the way it's supposed to be?
Hmm.
Um, and the other piece is I realized that a big reason that I was triggered was because I felt like there was zero representation of the way that we do it.
Yeah.
You look around and you're like, I didn't see anybody who was practicing it in the way that I saw my aunties practice it, my mom practice it, and my cousins, and the way that we did it together. And now I feel like I'm seeing more and more of that representation really just in the past year. And maybe it's because I'm on TikTok and I see these things come up in my feed and I'm connecting with other women who belly dance. And I feel so much better knowing that there's representation of the cultural practice because I think it's different, a practice that's being commodified or a practice that's there for performance and a practice that's just done in the cultural context. They're different and they're going to be different. And the world deserves to see and know those differences and deserves to be able to see the sides of belly dance it doesn't often see. Especially when brown and black women are practicing it. You don't get to see that very often,
Yeah.
right? Even the face of belly dance has become very white in the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely like most of the belly dancers that I knew that performed publicly were definitely not of the community. And I think for me,
Yeah.
similar to what you're saying, my trigger around it was it felt like it was something distinctly female
Mm,
and tribal and community based that was being stripped away from us and then presented for the consumption of primarily men,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that infuriated me, you
Yeah.
know?
'Cause
Um,
it feels like the opposite of what it was created for us,
yes.
right? It's actually my sister doesn't like belly dance. We all grew up belly dancing. My sister doesn't like it because of that, because she felt like, "Oh, it's this exploitative thing," because of what she was receiving from the outside versus what we were still trying to carry on from the inside. It's so hard. It's so hard to claim ownership over something when it's been so taken away from us in a big
Hmm.
way. Or it feels, I should say it feels so taken away from us in a big way when it's about the consumption of men. Although my mom told me that in different places it's just complicated. Like it's been used um for sex workers have used it, and it doesn't make it less of a historical practice. It's still a historical practice in that way. This is just a different historical practice, you know?
So what are you
I just wish
here?
there could be a differentiation.
Yeah, me too. Um,
Don't get it
but
twisted.
but I think it happens actually to a lot of native practices. They
Yeah.
get y- editorialized and then offered up for consumption rather than honored for what they are. But what are
Especially
you,
with yeah.
especially with, I'm sorry,
Because of colonization. I think
correct.
colonization exploited a lot of practices. But yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yes. So tell me what you're hearing now. Like you've been teaching belly dance now for 2, 3 years, right?
I've been yeah, in life, I've been teaching it since I was 18
Hmm.
for, like, 4 years, and then after that, I don't how long have I been teaching it? I don't know uh, I started teaching it in person probably in 2017 or something like that. 2018 maybe, but yes, it's a couple years.
So what are you learning now? How has that changed your viewpoint as new people came into it, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked me this right now because I took a cultural practice and thought, okay, if I teach this, what does that look like? How do I teach this in a way where I'm not changing what it is and what it was meant to be, right? So I don't teach choreography because I didn't learn choreography. That's not how I learned it growing up. We learned it by dancing with each other, by learning from each other and practicing isolation, and by just having fun together in community and connecting and tapping into our bodies. So the way that I teach it is really about tapping into your body, connecting with the women around you, and about learning movements, but not about, precise movements. It doesn't look like this on every body, right? Every body is different. So I've seen one auntie do one move and then another auntie say, "Oh, show me that." And it looks completely different on her body, but still beautiful, right? So we all have different abilities, different bodies. And so figuring out how to teach that has been really fun. And I have an in-person 6-week program that I do. And I feel like over the course of 6 weeks, we become a family, like we're so connected and it feels like I get to recreate something that was passed down to me. I don't have any daughters to pass it down to, which was heartbreaking for me. It's not hurt. I love my babies. And I think I was meant to have sons for maybe the reasons that I'm passionate about this, right?
Yeah.
Um, and, I'm not passing this dance practice down to my babies in the same way. I get to pass it out to the world. And so I feel like that's what we're doing. And I've tried to create it into an online course. And I did it online last year. And I was like, I feel like there's something that's missing. I need to recreate it in some kind of way. And I'm doing it, I'm actually in the middle of it online right now. And I'm still grappling with, okay, you're taking a cultural practice, turning it into something that's teachable. And now you're taking the teachable thing and turning it into something that's online. How do I do this while still honoring where this dance practice came from and how it was meant to be practiced? How do you build community online? How do you connect with women online? How do you be okay with people being silly and messing up and, you know, dancing off beat without feeling uncomfortable that they're in a room with all of these screens, instead of being in a room with all of these other women? So it's been so interesting trying to figure that out without losing any part of the actual cultural practice.
Yeah.
And to me, that's so vitally important Because I feel like a reason that this practice gets taken away from us sometimes is because we're trying to figure out how do we share something that's so personal and so beautiful and so powerful with the world. And and there are times where we try to do it within a Western context, right? Which is a way of teaching that's like, I know everything, I'm the teacher. You are the student, you will receive all of this, versus the way that we learned it, which is that we're all learning from each other. My 75-year-old auntie is learning moves from me, and I'm learning moves from my 60-year-old cousin. There are all these, and I'm also learning moves from my 10-year-old cousin, right? We're all moving our bodies, and when we see something beautiful, we're inspired and we're learning from that. So it's really important to me that I keep the heart of the dance, and the intention of the dance.
Mhm.
And so I think it's an ever-changing process of learning how to teach it to broader society and making sure that the things that are important to the cultural practice don't get lost in the
Yeah.
process. Because some people will see me doing some things, right? They'll say, "Oh, I can't do that because my body, I have a big belly or I have." Look, my body is not the prototype.
Yeah.
In fact, if you're around all of my family members, my body doesn't do a lot of the things that other people's bodies can do. I can't share the videos of my family and of our belly dance parties because they're private, and I respect that there are women who want. Dancing in private spaces with women is so awesome and so powerful and so empowering, and I don't want to violate that. So I think that needs to that needs to continue to exist, and I'm choosing to share it publicly. But just because I'm the one that's sharing it publicly doesn't mean that I'm the one that's doing it that your body has to look like this, or you have to wear these clothes, or you have to, so I get concerned sometimes when those kinds of things come up, and I realize if I'm not explicitly saying, remember,
Mhm.
I'm not showing you the only way that this can be done, then people take things and internalize them or interpret them in their own way, and that can be hard.
Okay. So now I get to ask you a question that I ask all my guests. And
Yeah.
it is, what is a weird habit or ritual you have that makes your life more joyful?
Mhm. Okay, so the reason this was so hard for me to think of something is because I have so many things. I'm like, can I tell you 20 things? I think the thing that makes me the most joyful is I love uh, hoodie footy kind of fuzzy onesies because they make me so happy in my life. So this is gonna sound wild. My family is so used to this. If I'm having a hard day or I'm just feeling low, I love wearing my onesie and singing karaoke by myself. Like everybody go to bed.
Go to bed. The onesie's out. The onesie's out. Go to bed.
I break out in karaoke and I'll sing and dance like I am the star of my own music video or I'm on my own stage, and it makes me so happy. I think everyone deserves the space and the safety to be fully self-expressed
Sure.
without shame or fear.
I absolutely love that. And that is an image that will stay with me.
Perfect. Now you really know me.
Yep. Jahan, it was a pleasure having you. And if you'd like to hear more from Nurjahan, she teaches belly dance online and in person in Southern California. To learn more about her practice and offerings, you can visit www.nurjahanboulden.com/belly-dance. All links in the show notes below. As always, I'd love to hear from you about this episode. What does dance mean to you? Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Farrah Haidar. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll get notified when the next episode is available. Also, I'm giving away a PDF of some of the best quotes we've had on the show, beautifully designed to print and journal your thoughts. Email me at farrah@farrahhaidar.com and title it Quotes. Talk to you soon. Till then, chase your happy.